My son is not sharing a room with that thing. Victoria Whitmore's voice sliced through the pediatric ward like a blade, sharp enough to make nurses freeze mid-step. She stood in the doorway of room 304, designer handbag clutched tight, her face twisted in disgust as she stared at the small girl lying in the bed near the window. "Mrs. Whitmore, please lower your voice," Nurse Patricia whispered urgently, glancing toward the child. "This is a hospital. I don't care what this is." Victoria's perfectly manicured finger jabbed toward the girl. "Look at her. She's probably carrying some disease from wherever she came from. My Ethan has a compromised immune system. I will not allow him to be exposed to that." The little girl, no more than 9 years old, pulled her thin hospital blanket higher, her dark eyes filling with tears she desperately tried to hide. And the fourth line ran into her small arm, and monitors beeped steadily beside her bed. "My name is Diana Foster, and I'm 39 years old. I never imagined that leaving my office early to spend the afternoon with my daughter would lead to this moment standing in a hospital corridor, watching a stranger dehumanize my child while I'm dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of my white coat. Ma'am, that child is seriously ill." Patricia tried again, her voice strained. "She's been here for 3 days receiving treatment for. I don't need her medical history." Victoria's cold blue eyes swept over the nurse dismissively. "I need her removed. Immediately. Or I'll be speaking to hospital administration about the kind of elements you people allow in the pediatric wing." I stepped forward from where I'd been standing near the vending machines, my hands still holding 2 juice boxes I'd just purchased. "Excuse me," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "That's my daughter you're talking about." Victoria's gaze shifted to me, taking in my casual clothes, my natural hair, my brown skin. Her lip curled slightly. "Of course she is," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Well, you need to understand that my son requires a private environment. He's scheduled for a critical surgery in 2 days with Dr. Foster, the hospital's top pediatric cardiac surgeon. Perhaps you've heard of her?" The irony nearly made me laugh. "His recovery will be delicate," Victoria continued, warming to her subject. "I specifically requested this room because of its proximity to the surgical wing. Your daughter can be moved to wherever is appropriate for patients like her." "Patients like her?" I repeated softly. "You know what I mean." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Charity cases. Medicaid patients, whatever program you're using to get treatment here. There are county facilities for that sort of thing." My daughter Lily shifted in her bed, trying to make herself smaller. She'd been so brave through everything. The diagnosis, the treatments, the painful procedures. But I could see her spirit cracking under this woman's venom. "Mrs. Whitmore," Nurse Patricia intervened, her voice firmer now. "I really must insist. What you must do is find my son a proper room," Victoria snapped. "Away from this situation. I'm calling my husband right now. He sits on the hospital board, and when he hears about this, absolutely unacceptable." "Mom? Mom?" A weak voice came from the hallway. A pale boy around 10 years old stood there in a wheelchair, pushed by an orderly. His breathing was labored, and even from a distance, I could see the telltale signs of his condition. The slight blue tint to his lips, the way his small chest worked too hard for each breath. Ethan Whitmore. I'd reviewed his file just yesterday. "Ethan, sweetheart, go back to the waiting area," Victoria said quickly, moving to block his view of Lily. "Mommy's handling something." But the boy had already seen her. "Is that my roommate?" he asked, his voice hopeful. "I thought I'd be alone." "Mom, can we—" "No." Victoria's response was immediate and sharp. "You're not sharing with anyone. I'm fixing this right now." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Gerald?" "Yes, it's me. I'm at St. Catherine's with Ethan, and we have a serious problem. They've put him in a room with some charity case. A little black girl who looks like she should be in a completely different facility. I need you to call whoever you need to call and get this resolved. Now." The way she said "black girl" made it sound like a disease. I watched my daughter's face crumble. watched her try to disappear into her pillow. 9 years old and already learning how some people see her. Already learning that her illness, her pain, her humanity could be dismissed because of her skin color. "I want to speak to the hospital administrator," Victoria announced, lowering her phone. "And I want documentation that I formally requested a transfer due to incompatible room assignments." Nurse Patricia looked at me, her eyes apologetic and furious. We both knew what incompatible meant. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said calmly, taking a step closer. "Your son's surgery is in 48 hours. Complex congenital heart defect requiring a modified Fontan procedure with additional valve repair. Am I correct?" Victoria blinked, surprised. "How do you—" "The surgeon performing that procedure," I continued, my voice still steady, "is very particular about preoperative conditions. Stress, for instance, can complicate recovery significantly, creating hostile environments, causing unnecessary emotional trauma. These things matter. I don't need a lecture from you." Victoria sneered. "I'm sure you have no idea about the caliber of surgeon my son has. Dr. Foster is the best in the country. She's published, she's won awards, she's standing right in front of you," I said quietly. The color drained from Victoria's face. Behind me, Nurse Patricia made a small sound that might have been satisfaction. Down the hall, I could see other staff members had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Some of them knew me. Some of them were starting to smile. Victoria's mouth opened and closed several times. You're not. You can't be." "Dr. Diana Foster," I confirmed. "Chief of Pediatric Cardiac Surgery. And yes, I'm scheduled to operate on your son in 2 days." I paused, letting that sink in. "The same son you don't want sharing a room with my daughter because she's—" "What was your phrase? That thing?" "If you're invested in seeing how this plays out, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice." Victoria's designer handbag slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with an expensive thud. Victoria's recovery was almost impressive. Within 30 seconds, the shock on her face transformed into something harder, more calculated. She bent to retrieve her handbag, her movements deliberate as she straightened, smoothing her silk blouse. "Well," she said, her voice regaining its sharp edge, "this is certainly unexpected." Her eyes narrowed. "Though I suppose the hospital's diversity initiatives have become quite aggressive lately." I felt Nurse Patricia stiffen beside me. "Diversity initiative," I repeated flatly. "That's an interesting way to describe 15 years of medical school, residency fellowship, and over 200 successful pediatric cardiac surgeries." Victoria's smile was thin and cold. "Of course. I'm sure your credentials are adequate. However, given this unfortunate situation, I think it would be best for everyone if we requested a different surgeon. Someone without this obvious conflict of interest." "Mom?" Ethan's small voice wavered from his wheelchair. "What's happening?" "I thought Dr. Foster was supposed to help me." "Hush, sweetheart." Victoria didn't even look at him. "Mommy's handling this." She pulled out her phone again, her fingers moving with purpose. "Gerald needs to know about this development. I'm certain the hospital has other qualified surgeons who can—" "Actually, they don't." Dr. Richard Chen appeared at the end of the hallway, his white coat marking him as the chief of surgery. His expression was carefully neutral, but I'd worked with him long enough to recognize the anger in his eyes. "Dr. Foster is the only surgeon on staff qualified to perform the modified Fontan with valve repair that your son requires. The next closest specialist is in Boston, and your son's condition doesn't allow for transfer." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Then bring someone in. Fly them here. My husband's insurance will cover—" "Mrs. Whitmore." "Doctor." Chen's voice cut through her words like a scalpel. "Your son's preoperative window closes in 48 hours. Any deterioration beyond that point makes surgery significantly more dangerous. There isn't time to bring in another specialist, establish care, and review his case properly." The reality settled over the hallway like fog. Victoria's face cycled through emotions, fear, rage, calculation. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, become almost reasonable. "Dr. Foster, She turned to me and I could see the effort it took her to soften her tone. I apologize if my earlier comments seemed harsh. I was simply advocating for my son's health, as any mother would. Surely you understand, being a mother yourself. The manipulation was textbook. Acknowledge the offense without taking responsibility, then appeal to shared identity. I'm certain we can put this misunderstanding behind us, Victoria continued. My concern was purely medical, you understand. And now that we've cleared the air, I'm sure you'll provide Ethan with the same excellent care you'd give any patient. She wasn't apologizing. She was negotiating. Trying to secure my surgical skills while making it clear she still believed herself superior. Any patient, I echoed. Including the ones you call things? Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment. That wasn't, you're twisting my words. Mom, I recorded it. Lily's quiet voice came from her bed. She held up her phone with a trembling hand. The whole thing. From when you started yelling. My daughter. 9 years old, sick and hurting, but still brave enough to document her own dehumanization. Victoria's face went white, then red. You little... Careful. I warned softly. Choose your next words very carefully, Mrs. Whitmore. The silence stretched taut. Then Victoria's phone rang, and she answered it with visible relief. Gerald, thank God. Yes, I'm still here. Listen, we have a situation that needs immediate attention. She walked a few steps away, but her voice carried clearly. The surgeon they've assigned to Ethan is completely unacceptable. Yes, I'm aware of the timeline, but there are standards we need to maintain. I don't care what her resume says. I will not have my son's life in the hands of some affirmative action hire who probably only got her position because of quotas. Nurse Patricia gasped. Dr. Chen's face hardened, and I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. I'd grown up in Southside Chicago, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I'd spent my childhood studying under streetlights because we couldn't always afford electricity. I'd been told 1,000 times that medicine wasn't for girls like me, that I should be realistic, pick something more achievable. I'd ignored them all. Every racist professor who questioned my admission. Every colleague who assumed I was a nurse, not a doctor. Every patient who requested someone else, someone who looked more qualified. I'd built my career on excellence because I knew that being good wasn't enough. I had to be exceptional, perfect, undeniable. And this woman who'd never worked a day in her life, who'd inherited her husband's money and her family's prejudice, was calling me an affirmative action hire. Dr. Foster? Nurse Patricia touched my arm gently. Are you okay? Before I could answer, alarms started blaring from Lily's bed. Her monitors spiked, the steady beeping becoming erratic. She clutched her chest, her face contorting in pain. Lily! I rushed to her bedside, my training kicking in instantly. Patricia, get me! Already on it, she said, moving with practiced efficiency. I held my daughter's hand, checked her vitals, adjusted her medication flow. Within 90 seconds, the crisis passed, but it left us both shaking. This was why Lily was here. Her heart condition was deteriorating, and we were running out of time to find a donor match. Is she okay? Ethan's small voice asked. He'd wheeled himself closer, his face worried. She looked scared. She's stable now, I said quietly, still holding Lily's hand. I'm scared too, Ethan admitted. About my surgery. Does it hurt a lot after? I really looked at him. A sick little boy who just wanted to get better, who had the misfortune of being raised by a woman who valued skin color over humanity. The first few days are tough, I told him honestly. But we give you good medicine for pain. And it gets easier every day. Mom says you're the best, he said. She read all about you. She told Dad you've never lost a patient like me. Victoria had ended her call and was walking back toward us. She stopped when she heard Ethan's words, her expression unreadable. That's true, I confirmed. I have a perfect success rate with your specific condition. Then why doesn't Mom want you to do my surgery? Ethan asked, confusion clear in his voice. Victoria's face flushed. Ethan, that's not... We were just discussing options. I heard you on the phone. he said quietly. You said she wasn't good enough. The boy was sharper than his mother gave him credit for. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and something like satisfaction crossed her face. Dr. Foster, I've just received confirmation from my husband. He's spoken with the hospital board chairman. They've agreed that given the personal nature of this situation, your daughter being treated in the same ward, it would be appropriate to bring in a consulting surgeon. For quality assurance purposes, you understand. Dr. Chun's expression darkened. Mrs. Whitmore, that's not how. It's already been approved. Victoria interrupted smoothly. Dr. Morrison from Johns Hopkins will be reviewing the case remotely and providing oversight. My husband has arranged to cover any additional costs. She'd gone over our heads. Used her money and connections to question my competence, to install a supervisor for a surgery I'd performed successfully dozens of times. Dr. Morrison, I said quietly. Interesting choice. You know him? Victoria asked, surprised. He was my mentor during my fellowship, I replied. He'll tell you the same thing, Doctor. Chun did that. I'm the best person for this surgery. But Victoria had already moved on. Her confidence restored now that she'd reasserted control. We'll see. In the meantime, I expect my son will be moved to a different room by end of day. Away from distractions. She collected Ethan, who looked back at Lily with apologetic eyes as his mother wheeled him away. Nurse Patricia waited until they were out of earshot. Dr. Foster, you can't let her. I know, I said quietly, but my mind was already working, documenting, planning. Victoria Whitmore had no idea what she'd just started, or that every word of her phone call had been captured by the hospital's hallway security cameras. The hospital's legal department occupied a cramped office on the third floor, wedged between medical records and billing. I'd never had reason to visit before, but 3 hours after Victoria's hallway performance, I sat across from Jennifer Okafor, the hospital's chief counsel. Let me make sure I understand correctly. Jennifer rewound the security footage on her laptop. Mrs. Whitmore called your daughter that thing, demanded her removal based purely on race, then questioned your professional qualifications when she discovered you'd be operating on her son? That's accurate, I confirmed. Jennifer watched the footage again, her expression growing darker. The cameras had captured everything: Victoria's disgust, her phone calls, her dismissive treatment of the nursing staff. Even the audio was clear enough to make out most of her words. And she's now attempting to override your surgical authority by bringing in outside oversight? Jennifer's fingers drummed on her desk. Dr. Foster, I want to be very clear about something. What happened in that hallway wasn't just unprofessional behavior from a stressed parent. It was racial discrimination, harassment, and potentially creates a hostile environment claim. I'm aware, I said quietly. Are you also aware that you would be well within your rights to refuse to operate? Jennifer leaned forward. Given her statements questioning your qualifications based on race, continuing care could be seen as accepting a hostile working relationship. The thought had crossed my mind, but every time I considered it, I saw Ethan's face, confused, scared, apologizing for his mother's behavior. I won't abandon a patient because his mother is ignorant, I said firmly. But I also won't let her behavior go unchallenged. Jennifer nodded slowly. Then we document everything. Every interaction, every statement, every attempt to undermine your authority. And when this is over, we make sure there are consequences. She pulled up a template on her screen. I'm officially filing an incident report. I'll also be sending a memo to the board chairman, the real one. Not whatever contact Mr. Whitmore thinks he has, outlining the legal liability of allowing a patient's family to create a discriminatory environment. Mrs. Whitmore mentioned her husband sits on the hospital board, I said. Gerald Whitmore is on the fundraising auxiliary committee, Jennifer corrected with a slight smile. He donates money. That doesn't give him authority over medical decisions or personnel, though he certainly likes to imply otherwise. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Richard Chun, Morrison called. He's furious they're using him to question you. Sending formal letter of support. Also wants to know if you need him to fly in and tell Victoria off personally. I showed the message to Jennifer, who actually laughed. Your mentor sounds like my kind of person. He doesn't tolerate prejudice, I said. He's the one who taught me that excellence is the best response to bigotry. But documentation runs a close second. Over the next 24 hours, I discovered just how far Victoria was willing to go. She filed a formal complaint with patient services, claiming I'd been hostile and unprofessional during our interaction. When the patient advocate reviewed the security footage, the complaint was dismissed within an hour. She attempted to have Lily moved to a different floor. Citing concerns about cross-contamination, the hospital's infection control specialist pointed out that both children had already been cleared for shared accommodation and that separating them now had no medical basis. She showed up at the nurses' station with a list of preoperative requirements that included having a supervising physician present during Ethan's surgery. Dr. Chun personally informed her that no such requirement existed, and that attempting to dictate surgical protocol could delay or cancel the procedure entirely. But it was her behavior toward the staff that revealed her true character. Nurse Patricia? I found her in the supply room, her eyes red. What happened? She shook her head. Mrs. Whitmore cornered me during rounds. Told me that if I valued my job, I'd forget what I heard yesterday. Said her husband has connections that could make my nursing license disappear. She threatened you. My voice went cold. She called it friendly advice. Patricia's hands shook as she organized medication vials. Dr. Foster, I've been a nurse for 18 years. I've dealt with difficult families before. But the way she talks about your daughter, about you. She trailed off. I wrote down everything she said. Times, dates, witnesses. Just in case. Thank you, I said quietly. And Patricia, her husband has no power over your license. But I know people at the state nursing board. If she contacts them with false complaints, we'll handle it. Word spread quickly through the pediatric wing. Other nurses reported similar encounters, Victoria questioning their competence, demanding to know which staff members were real Americans, making comments about standard slipping whenever she saw Black or Hispanic employees. She was systematic in her bigotry, which meant she'd done this before. Dr. Foster? A young resident named Marcus Williams caught me between rounds. I heard what happened. I wanted you to know that Mrs. Whitmore asked Dr. Chen yesterday if there were any American-trained surgeons available. When he told her you did your residency at Stanford and your fellowship at Johns Hopkins, she asked if those schools had special admission programs. The insults kept coming, each one documented, each one adding to a growing file. But Victoria had made one critical mistake. She'd assumed that her money and connections made her untouchable, that people would stay silent rather than risk her displeasure. She'd never encountered people who'd spent their careers fighting against exactly that assumption. On the evening before Ethan's surgery, I sat in my office reviewing the case file one final time. The procedure was complex, but well within my expertise. 8 hours, maybe 9. High risk, but manageable. My phone rang. An unknown number. Dr. Foster? This is Margaret Chun, Richard's wife. I hope you don't mind him sharing your number. Of course not, I said, surprised. Margaret was a civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking on discrimination cases others considered unwinnable. Richard told me what's happening at your hospital, she said without preamble. I've been doing some research on Victoria and Gerald Whitmore. Did you know they've been asked to leave 3 different country clubs in the past 5 years? Each time for complaints about discriminatory behavior towards staff, I sat up straighter. I didn't. There's more. Gerald's company settled a discrimination lawsuit 2 years ago, paid out a significant sum to avoid trial, and Victoria herself was removed from a school board committee after multiple complaints about racist remarks during meetings. They have a pattern, I said slowly. A well-documented one, Margaret confirmed. Dr. Foster, I'm not suggesting you do anything that would compromise your professional ethics. But I want you to know that if you choose to pursue action after this is over, you won't be alone. And you'll have evidence that this isn't an isolated incident, it's who they are. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my office, thinking about patterns. About people who wielded prejudice like a weapon, confident they'd never face consequences. About a little girl in a hospital bed who'd learned to record her own dehumanization, because she'd already figured out that truth needed proof. My office door opened quietly. Lily stood there in her hospital gown, pulling her 4-pole. "Baby, you should be resting," I said, standing quickly. I couldn't sleep. She climbed into my lap, careful of her lines. "Mom, are you still going to do Ethan's surgery?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Even though his mom is mean?" "Especially because his mom is mean," I told her. "Ethan didn't choose his mother. He's just a scared little boy who needs help. And I became a doctor to help sick children, not to judge them by their parents' failures." Lily was quiet for a moment. "The other kids in the ward told me Mrs. Whitmore tried to get you fired." "She tried," I agreed. "It didn't work, because you're too good at your job." "Because the truth is stronger than lies," I said. "And because there are good people here who won't stay silent when they see something wrong." What I didn't tell my daughter was that I'd spent the evening documenting every incident, every witness statement, every piece of evidence. That Jennifer had already drafted a comprehensive complaint. That Margaret had connected me with 3 other families who'd been victimized by the Whitmore's prejudice. That tomorrow I would perform a flawless surgery that would save Ethan's life. And the day after, Victoria Whitmore would discover that some people don't back down, don't stay quiet, and definitely don't forget. The surgery took 9 hours and 42 minutes. Ethan's heart was more damaged than the scans had shown. Years of stress on malformed valves had created complications that would have killed him within weeks without intervention. But my hands were steady, my team flawless, and when I finally closed his chest and watched his repaired heartbeat strong and regular on the monitors, I felt the familiar rush of victory over death. "Exceptional work, Dr. Foster," the anesthesiologist said as we wheeled Ethan toward recovery. That valve repair was textbook perfect. In the surgical waiting room, Victoria had spent those 9 hours making everyone miserable. Nurse Patricia told me later what happened. Victoria had demanded hourly updates, then complained that the updates weren't detailed enough. She'd called the hospital administrator 4 times questioning why the surgery was taking so long, implying I was incompetent. She'd told another waiting family that she couldn't trust these diversity hires, and had tried to have the hospital chaplain removed because he was Hispanic. She actually said she wanted someone who spoke proper English to pray for her son. Patricia reported, disgust clear in her voice. "Father Rodriguez has been our chaplain for 15 years. I changed out of my surgical scrubs, exhausted but satisfied. Ethan would live. He'd have a normal childhood, play sports, go to college. Despite his mother's attempts to sabotage his care through her bigotry, I'd given him a future." When I entered the waiting room, Victoria jumped to her feet. Her designer outfit was wrinkled, her makeup smudged, but her voice was sharp as ever. "Finally! 9 hours is completely unacceptable. I demand to know why." "Your son is alive," I said quietly. "The surgery was successful. He's in recovery now." Victoria's mouth snapped shut. For a brief moment, I saw genuine relief cross her face, a mother's love for her child breaking through her armor of prejudice. Then she collected herself. "Well, of course it was successful," she said dismissively. "With Dr. Morrison supervising remotely, I'm sure you were kept on track." Dr. Chun, who'd been observing from the doorway, stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Morrison wasn't supervising. He sent a letter stating that Dr. Foster needed no oversight, and that suggesting otherwise was insulting to one of the finest cardiac surgeons in the country." Victoria's face flushed. "That's not," Gerald said. "Your husband has no authority over surgical protocols," Dr. Chun continued. "Dr. Foster performed this surgery independently, as she's done hundreds of times before. Your son survived because of her excellence, not despite your interference." "I want to see Ethan," Victoria demanded, changing tactics. "Immediately. He'll be in recovery for another 2 hours," I explained. "Then he'll be moved to ICU for monitoring." "You can see him briefly then, but he'll be heavily sedated. I'm his mother. I'll see him when I want to see him." "You'll see him when it's medically appropriate," I corrected. "Your convenience doesn't override his care." Something ugly flickered across Victoria's face. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you? A chance to exercise some petty authority over me. To make me beg." "Mrs. Whitmore, I just spent 9 hours saving your son's life, I said evenly. I don't need to make you beg. I need you to let him rest. She opened her mouth to argue, but her phone rang. When she answered it, the color drained from her face. What do you mean, a complaint? No, I never. That's completely who filed it? Her eyes darted to me, then away. I'll call you back. She lowered the phone slowly. Someone has filed a formal discrimination complaint against me with the hospital. I assume that was you. It was me, Jennifer Okafor said, appearing behind Dr. Chun. Along with 7 staff members, 3 witnesses, and multiple documentation sources including security footage, recorded statements, and a pattern of behavior analysis. Victoria's hand tightened on her phone. This is absurd. I was simply advocating for my son's medical care. You called a 9-year-old child that thing, Jennifer interrupted. You demanded she be removed from a hospital room because of her race. You threatened nursing staff, questioned Dr. Foster's qualifications based solely on her skin color, and made discriminatory remarks to multiple employees over a 48-hour period. That's not, you're twisting everything. We have video evidence, Jennifer said calmly. She pulled out a tablet, turning it so Victoria could see the screen. The hallway footage played, crystal clear, capturing Victoria's exact words. My son is not sharing a room with that thing. Victoria's face went white. That was taken out of context, the video continued. Victoria on the phone. Some affirmative action hire who probably only got her position because of quotas. Then Victoria to the nurse. She's probably carrying some disease from wherever she came from. Would you like to explain the context that makes those statements acceptable? Jennifer asked. I was stressed, Victoria said, her voice rising. My son was about to have major surgery. People say things when they're emotional. You threatened Nurse Patricia's license, Dr. Chun interjected. That's not stress. That's calculated intimidation. And these, Jennifer continued, swiping through images on the tablet, are complaints filed against you at Oakmont Country Club, Riverside Academy board meetings, and your husband's company's HR department, all documenting similar behavior patterns. Victoria's hands shook. How did you have no right to access public records and voluntary statements from individuals you've harassed over the years, Jennifer said, all eager to finally see consequences. The waiting room had gone completely silent. Other families pretended not to watch, but every ear was tuned to the conversation. This is a conspiracy, Victoria hissed. You people are targeting me because I dared to question. You people, I repeated softly. Even now you can't help yourself. Victoria spun toward me, her composure finally cracking completely. You should be thanking me. I gave you the opportunity to prove yourself. Without my son's case, you'd just be another mediocre doctor coasting on sympathy and quotas. Dr. Foster has published 43 peer-reviewed articles, Dr. Chen said, his voice ice cold. She's won the Denton Award for Surgical Excellence 3 times. She's been invited to lecture at 7 international medical conferences. And she has a perfect success rate for the procedure she just performed on your son. She wouldn't even have this position if hospitals weren't desperate to fill diversity requirements. Stop talking. Jennifer's command cut through Victoria's rant. Right now, Mrs. Whitmore, before you make this worse. Worse? Victoria laughed bitterly. My husband will have all of you fired. Do you understand who we are? The donations we make? We'll bury this hospital in lawsuits. Actually, Jennifer said, you won't. Because as of 1 hour ago, the hospital board, the actual board, not the fundraising committee, voted unanimously to ban you from all hospital facilities, except during supervised visitation with your son. Victoria staggered slightly. They can, and they did. You'll be allowed 30-minute visits with Ethan, accompanied by security and a patient advocate. Any abusive behavior towards staff will result in immediate removal and potential restraining orders. My husband has been asked to resign from the fundraising committee, Jennifer finished. The board reviewed his complaint attempts and found them to be harassment of medical staff. His connections don't exist. For those following this story and wondering if justice truly prevails, Make sure you're subscribed because the consequences are just getting started. Victoria's phone rang again, then again. She ignored both calls, staring at Jennifer like she was seeing a monster. "You can't do this to us," she whispered. "We're respected members of this community." "You were," Dr. Chen corrected. Past tense. "Mrs. Whitmore." A new voice entered the conversation. Margaret Chen stepped into the waiting room, her professional suit and briefcase marking her as exactly what she was, a lawyer who didn't lose. "I represent the 4 families currently filing civil suits against you and your husband for discrimination and harassment. We'd like to schedule your deposition." Victoria's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a chair for support. "This is also for you," Margaret continued, handing her an envelope. "Notice that your membership at Riverside Academy has been terminated effective immediately. The board cited your behavior at meetings and the current hospital investigation." The envelope slipped from Victoria's fingers. "How?" she breathed. "How did this happen so fast?" "You weaponized your privilege for years," I said quietly. "You hurt people and assumed they'd stay silent. But you made one critical mistake, Mrs. Whitmore. You went after my daughter where I could see it, where cameras could record it, where witnesses could document it. And you discovered," Jennifer added, "that some people fight back." Victoria looked around the waiting room, at the staff members watching with satisfaction, at the other families who'd witnessed her behavior, at the growing crowd of people she'd underestimated. "My son just had surgery," she said desperately. "You can't do this while he's—" "Your son is receiving excellent care despite your attempts to sabotage it," I said. "He'll recover fully because I did my job with excellence, as I always do. But your behavior has consequences, Mrs. Whitmore, and those consequences start now." Victoria's face crumbled as the full weight of her destroyed reputation crashed down on her. 3 weeks after Ethan's surgery, I stood in the hospital's main conference room facing a gathering that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. Ethan was recovering beautifully. His repaired heart functioned perfectly. His color had returned, and according to his physical therapist, he'd already started asking when he could play soccer. The boy had his mother's determination, if nothing else. But it was the people filling the conference room who told the real story of what had happened after that day in the waiting room. "Dr. Foster," Hospital Board Chairman Patricia Valdez began, her voice carrying clearly through the space. "On behalf of St. Catherine's Medical Center, I want to formally apologize for the environment that allowed discrimination to flourish unchecked. Your professionalism in the face of unconscionable behavior exemplifies the values we claim to uphold but clearly failed to protect." Cameras flashed. The hospital had invited media to this public statement, making sure the story that went viral wasn't just Victoria's racism, but the institution's response to it. "We're implementing immediate policy changes," Valdez continued. "Zero-tolerance protocols for discriminatory behavior from patients or families. Mandatory bias training for all staff, and an independent review board to hear complaints without fear of retaliation." Beside me, Nurse Patricia wiped her eyes. She'd been promoted to patient advocacy coordinator, tasked with ensuring no staff member ever faced threats like Victoria had made again. "Additionally," Valdez said, "we're establishing the Foster Excellence in Medicine Scholarship, providing full funding for minority students pursuing pediatric surgery." I hadn't known about that part. My throat tightened as the room erupted in applause. But the hospital's response was only the beginning. Victoria and Gerald Whitmore's social dismantling had been swift and absolute. The country club had revoked their membership. Gerald's company, facing renewed scrutiny of its discrimination settlement, had asked him to step down from the executive board. 3 major charities had returned their donations and removed their names from donor walls. The civil suits Margaret Chen filed on behalf of the 4 families moved forward rapidly. Each case revealed another pattern of racist behavior. A housekeeper fired after complaining about Victoria's slurs. A contractor denied payment because he was Hispanic. A child's birthday party canceled when Victoria discovered the entertainer was Black. She built her entire life on the assumption that money bought immunity. Margaret told me over coffee one morning. When that immunity disappeared, everything collapsed. The local newspaper had run a devastating expose. The price of prejudice. how one family's racism caught up to them. It detailed decades of complaints, settlements, and NDAs that the Whitmores had used to silence victims, until they met people who refused to be silenced. Dr. Foster? A quiet voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find Ethan standing in the conference room doorway, accompanied by a social worker. He'd been discharged a week ago but had requested to attend today's event. "Ethan," I said warmly. "How are you feeling?" "Good," he said, touching his chest gingerly. "It doesn't hurt anymore. Dr. Mitchell says my heart sounds perfect." "I'm glad to hear it." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for what my mom said about Lily, about you, about everyone." His voice cracked. "I didn't know she was like that. I mean, I knew she said mean things sometimes, but I didn't understand." "Ethan, you don't need to apologize for your mother's choices," I told him gently. "Yes, I do," he insisted. "Because I stayed quiet. When she said things at home, I pretended not to hear. I should have said something." This 10-year-old boy, still recovering from major surgery, was taking accountability his mother had refused. "You're saying something now," I pointed out. "That takes courage." "I'm going to live with my dad," he said quietly. "My parents are getting divorced. Dad says what Mom did was unforgivable. That she embarrassed our whole family." He paused. "But it's not about being embarrassed, is it?" "It's about being wrong." "Yes," I agreed. "It's about being wrong." After Ethan left, Dr. Chen found me staring out the window at the pediatric wing. "Thinking about Victoria?" he asked. "Thinking about all the Victorias," I said. "The ones who've never been held accountable, who keep wielding prejudice as a weapon because they've never faced consequences." "You changed that," he said. "Not just here. Did you see the news coverage? Hospitals across the country are reviewing their discrimination protocols. Medical schools are using your case in ethics classes. You started something bigger than one racist woman in one hospital." That evening, I found Lily in her hospital bed, surrounded by get-well cards from her entire school. Her condition had stabilized, and we were finally on the transplant list with a good prognosis. "Mom?" she asked as I helped her with dinner. "Mrs. Rodriguez brought her grandson to visit today. He's 8. He told me his abuela said I was a hero." "Nurse Rodriguez said that?" Lily nodded. "She said I was brave for recording what Mrs. Whitmore said. That sometimes the hardest thing is keeping proof when people hurt you." 9 years old, and already understanding that truth needs documentation, that justice requires evidence. "You were brave," I told her. "But you shouldn't have to be. No child should have to record their own dehumanization." "But since we did," Lily said thoughtfully, "something good happened, right? Mrs. Whitmore can't hurt anyone else now. And the hospital changed its rules." She was right. Out of ugliness had come accountability. Out of one woman's prejudice had come systemic reform. 6 months later, I stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., accepting the National Medical Association's Distinguished Service Award. The citation specifically mentioned my unwavering commitment to excellence in the face of discrimination and advocacy for equitable healthcare. In the audience sat Nurse Patricia, Dr. Chun, Margaret Chun, and Jennifer Okafor. The people who'd refused to look away when injustice occurred. Who'd documented, supported, and fought back. And in the front row, wearing her best dress, sat Lily, healthy now, smiling, holding a sign that read, "That's my mom." People often ask me how I stayed calm during that incident. I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the crowded ballroom. How I didn't let anger compromise my professionalism. The truth is, I was furious. I wanted to walk away, to let Victoria Whitmore find another surgeon, to make her feel powerless the way she'd tried to make my daughter feel. The room was silent, listening. But I didn't, because I remembered something my mentor taught me. Excellence is the best response to bigotry. Not the only response. We must also document, report, and demand accountability. But excellence ensures they can never dismiss us as unqualified, can never pretend their prejudice is justified. I paused, looking directly at the cameras broadcasting this speech to medical schools across the country. To every young person of color entering medicine, They will question your qualifications. They will suggest you don't belong. They will call you diversity hires and affirmative action cases. And you will be tempted to let that poison seep into your confidence. Don't let them. Do the work. Be exceptional. Document everything. Find allies. And when they attack you, respond with such undeniable excellence that their prejudice becomes their own humiliation. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, a young black medical student approached me, her eyes wet with tears. "Dr. Foster, I'm a first year at Stanford. Last month, a patient refused my care and demanded someone more qualified. I almost quit." "But you didn't," I said. "Not after I saw your story," she replied. "You showed me that staying, excelling, and demanding accountability is how we change things." That night, as I flew home to Chicago, I received an email from Victoria Whitmore. The first communication since that day in the hospital. "Dr. Foster, I won't insult you with an apology you wouldn't believe, but I want you to know that I've lost everything. My marriage, my social standing, my reputation. People cross the street to avoid me. Former friends won't return my calls. You destroyed my life." Victoria Whitmore, I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed my response. "Mrs. Whitmore, I didn't destroy your life. I simply ensured that your actions had consequences. You destroyed your own life through decades of cruelty, prejudice, and the assumption that your privilege made you untouchable. Your son is alive and healthy because I chose excellence over revenge. I hope one day you'll understand the difference." Dr. Diana Foster, I never heard from her again. But I did hear from the 3 other families who'd sued the Whitmores. All 3 cases settled, with significant financial compensation and public apologies. One mother told me that getting acknowledgement, having someone admit, "Yes, what happened to you was wrong," mattered more than the money. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about validation. About refusing to let cruelty go unchallenged. 2 years later, Lily received her heart transplant. She's thriving now, playing basketball, talking about maybe becoming a doctor herself someday. And I'm still operating, still teaching, still proving every single day that excellence needs no qualifier, no asterisk, no explanation. Because the truth is simple. I'm not a good surgeon despite being a black woman. I'm not successful because of diversity initiatives. I'm one of the best pediatric cardiac surgeons in the country because I worked harder, studied longer, and refused to let prejudice define my ceiling. And when someone like Victoria Whitmore tries to weaponize racism against me or my child, I respond with documentation, accountability, and the kind of professional excellence that makes their bigotry look like the small, pathetic thing it really is. The best revenge isn't stooping to their level. It's rising so far above them that they spend the rest of their lives looking up at what they could never diminish. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up to injustice isn't just possible, it's necessary. Subscribe to see more stories of justice, courage, and the power of refusing to stay silent.